Good morning. It's the midweek edition of your Breakfast Show on Leadership Television inside Nigeria. My name is Unifor Dubebo. On today's program, we are looking at what the papers are saying, including Nigeria's most influential leadership. We normally flag off with leadership newspaper. Let's go there and see what leadership is offering this Wednesday. Of course, leadership has two cover wraparounds. However, they have a story on top, one of them. It says, BENUE killings, Governor Alia rejects self-defense, hints at community policing. BENUE killings, Governor Alia rejects self-defense, hints at community policing. The story continues on page 6 of Leadership. Beside that, INEC rejects PDP NEC meeting notice as Tinubu commits to autonomy. River Park Estate, Ghanaian businessmen sue IGP EFCC. The story continues on page 15 of Leadership, this midweek edition of the program. BENUE killings, Governor Alia rejects self-defense, hints at community policing. INEC rejects PDP NEC meeting notice as Tinubu commits to autonomy. River Park Estates, Ghanaian businessmen sue IGP EFCC. And these are stories atop the masthead of Leadership, with the governor of Benue State, Reverend Father Hyacinth Alia, welcoming President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to the state on a visit today. From that cover, we go to page 3. But today is page 5, incidentally, because of the adverts and the cover. It says, Nigerian youths in Russia's drone factories. Today stand in Leadership. Nigerian youths in Russia's drone factories. Nigeria recently made international headlines for the wrong reason again. Reports emerged recently that Nigerian youths were deceptively recruited into Russian factories, where they are now allegedly being used to manufacture drones for the ongoing war against Ukraine. To the shock of many, the Nigerian government said it had no knowledge of the scheme until the media exposed it. According to investigations, the Russian authorities lured these young Nigerians with promises of a non-existent special scholarship program. Instead of receiving education or skills training, the so-called beneficiaries were placed in drone assembly lines, exploited under the guise of opportunity, and subjected to conditions that reportedly violate international human rights and labor laws. Today's stand in Leadership, Nigerian youths in Russia's drone factories. Let's move towards the masthead, where we'll see the stand of the newspaper. It says, posterity will not be kind to any official who presides over such a discreditable era of Nigeria's foreign policy history. Our image is at stake, our youths are being exploited abroad, and our silence is complicity. The Nigerian government must also reassess its bilateral relationship with Russia. Any partnership that permits the exploitation of our citizens must be reviewed, if not suspended altogether. We call on the United Nations, the International Labour Organization, ILO, and other international bodies to support Nigeria in holding Russia accountable for this gross violation of human rights. Nigerians are not expendable and must not be seen as such, not in Russia, not anywhere, and certainly not under any government that claims to cater for its people. These are excerpts today from our stand in Leadership newspaper, and today's stand is on Nigerian youths in Russia's drone factories. From our stand, we go to the back page of the paper, where we have Wednesday column with Olufunke Baruwa. Today's column is on pre-vandalism and the burden of democratic governance. Pre-vandalism and the burden of democratic governance. Wednesday column with Olufunke Baruwa. Let's take some excerpts as we did our stand. In the lexicon of African political science, few concepts have endured with such explanatory power as pre-vandalism, a system in which elected officials and bureaucrats consider public office as a means of acquiring personal wealth and distributing state resources to their ethnic, religious, or political networks. Coined by political scientist Richard Joseph in 1987, the term captures a peculiarly persistent pathology of governance in many post-colonial states, particularly Nigeria. It is both an economic system of appropriation and a political culture that normalizes patronage and nepotism as legitimate forms of statecraft. Of course, I was curious about that word, pre-vandalism and the burden of democratic governance. Today's column with Olufunke Barowa. Of course, that first paragraph explains the meaning of pre-vandalism. Let's take some quotes from that column today. Pre-vandalism is not merely a political flaw, it is a moral crisis. It is both an economic system of appropriation and a political culture that normalizes patronage and nepotism as legitimate forms of statecraft. Today's column with Olufunke Barowa. Before we leave the back page, we must not always fail to visit Ghana Must Go. And the news today on Ghana Must Go from Osun State Governor: stop breaching broadcasting codes. Adeleke warns radio stations. And Ghana Must Go replied, dance for them. Very funny. Of course, it's known as fondly referred to as the dancing governor, Governor Adeleke. With that, we conclude review of Leadership newspaper this Wednesday. Don't forget to log into the website of Leadership for continuation of those headline stories, inside story, back column with Olufunke Barowa, and also inside stories, www.leadership.ng. From Leadership, we move over to the next papers we have on our lineup. Of course, they are talking about BENUE killings in light of President Bola's visit to the state today. It says BENUE bloodshed, that is the leading story on the Punch newspaper. BENUE bloodshed, governor assembly at odds as SGF ex-generals move in. SGF Akume ex-generals consult communities ahead of Tinubu's visit today. Leading story on the Punch newspaper this Wednesday. BENUE bloodshed, governor assembly at odds as SGF ex-generals move in. SGF Akume ex-generals consult communities ahead of Tinubu's visit today. Same leading story on Leadership newspaper. PDP crisis, chair governors INEC hold emergency talks. And we have, of course, Advertorial. That is Advertorial. Those are the two stories gracing the cover of the Punch newspaper this Wednesday. For more, log into the website of the Punch newspaper. From the Punch, we move over to the next paper we have on our lineup, and that is Vanguard newspaper. Vanguard's leading story says, still on BENUE killings. BENUE killings are gory ordeal by survivors. The story continues on page 5 of Vanguard newspaper. BENUE killings are gory ordeal by survivors. The story runs on page 5 of Vanguard newspaper. Fuel scarcity looms as marketers, truck owners boycott Lekki Ekpe corridor. Leading story today on Vanguard. Fuel scarcity looms as marketers, truck owners boycott Lekki Ekpe corridor. The story continues on page 19 of Vanguard newspaper. From Vanguard, we move over to the next paper we have on our lineup, and that is This Day. This Day have full stories today on its cover because, of course, it has just a strip of adverts underneath those stories. Senate leadership joins presidential trip to BENUE, says it is tired of killings. SGF assures people of Yelewata of federal government support. Obi thanks president for visiting state. Kickers to the leading story on today's This Day newspaper. Senate leadership joins presidential trip to BENUE, says it is tired of killings. SGF assures people of Yelewata of federal government support. Obi thanks president for visiting state. The SGF Akume is also from that state, former governor of the state. And on top of that leading story, Tinubu, INEC backbone of our democratic journey, role key to public trust in government. Tinubu, INEC backbone of our democratic journey, role key to public trust in government, says his commitment to strengthen electoral system unshaken. Commission rejects Damagun's notification for June 30 PDP NEC meeting, says not compliant. It's also a PDP story that is leading in all the papers before it that we read and in the ones we have on our lineup. Commission rejects Damagun's notification for June 30 PDP NEC meeting, says not compliant. From there, we move towards the masthead of this day. And above the masthead, we have CBN affirms strength of Nigerian banking sector, issues routine guidance for banks under forbearance. Bank shares dipped further. CBN affirms strength of Nigerian banking sector, issues routine guidance for banks under forbearance, why bank shares dipped further. That's if so a kicker to that leading story on top of the masthead of this day. National Assembly transmits landmark tax reform bills to President. The story continues on page 43 of this day. National Assembly transmits landmark tax reform bills to President, obviously for assent. The story, the tax reform bills that has generated so much controversy. However, at the end of the day, many gladiators were able to come to a compromise, and the bill has been, tax reform bills have been passed by both the two houses of the National Assembly, and it has now been forwarded, transmitted to the President for assent. From there, we move to the next paper, and next paper we have on our lineup, not our last paper, and that is The Guardian. Guardian's leading story says property owners shun of old title registries over bureaucracy grabbed. Property owners shun of old title registries over bureaucracy grabbed. The story runs on page 6 of the Guardian newspaper. The Nigerian Living Standards Survey, NLSS, reports show that 71.4% of landlords sampled across the 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory, FCT, are without titles. The report further revealed that while 13.2% of the country's property owners have title deeds, only 8.1% have a certificate of occupancy, that is C of O, issued by both federal and state governments. The estimated time for completion of land registration varies and tedious, lasting between 30 days to 12 months. In Lagos, for instance, a property owner would need to visit about 17 agencies to get permit approvals. An estimated $300 billion in deed capital is reported as landowners cannot leverage their properties for loans or investments. These are illustrations to the leading story today on the Guardian newspaper. Property owners shun of O title registries over bureaucracy graft. The story continues on page 6 of the Guardian. Senate CDS expressed frustration over BENUE killings amid push for community policing. Senate CDS expressed frustration over BENUE killings amid push for community policing. Federal government ties credit scores to NIN in major reform plan. We'll go after repentant bandits that renege, says Katsina government. EU commits €110 million to peace security projects in ECOWAS. It continues on page 5 of the Guardian. EU commits €110 million to peace security projects in ECOWAS. That takes us to the stories just beneath the masthead of the Guardian. INEC rejects PDP's NEC meeting notice without secretary's signature. INEC rejects PDP's NEC meeting notice without secretary's signature. Weak justice system frustrating 1.5 trillion naira bad loans recovery, judges told. Jakpa, daughters must be insensitized to stay in Nigeria, says former President Olusegun Obasanjo. The story runs on page 29 of the Guardian. And with that, we conclude review of front headline stories on the Guardian newspaper this Wednesday. We move ahead to the last paper we have on our lineup, and that is Blueprint. Blueprint's leading story is also on BENUE attacks. It says Alia rejects self-defense. Sule donates 150 million naira. And that is the same story we had on the cover of Leadership newspaper. Alia rejects self-defense, however, hints at community policing. Yakubu, the chairman of INEC, says for long, INEC suffered accommodation challenge arising from the commissioning, mega commissioning of INEC quarters yesterday by FCT Minister Nyesom Wike and President Bola Ahmed Tinubu. So it's on this note we conclude today's review of front headline newspapers of some select newspapers, including Leadership newspaper, on the segment of the show Inside Nigeria. this morning. My name is Winifred Ugbebo. I look forward to having you same time, same station tomorrow for another fresh edition of the program. Meanwhile, don't forget to stay in on this station for news on the hour. Thanks for joining us.
Be part of our brand. Leadership for God and country.
Leadership TV for God and country.
Thank you for watching. For sponsorship and advert placements, please contact 080-3688-6158. Last Word Leadership Podcast Studio. You have the last word.